Yeah. So this is
So
another
this is,
absorbed one,
Mm.
or carried along by.
carried along, absorbed.
This is the kind of thing that I would call carried along by. But I don't remember whether we did anything more about that. We had many long conversations about it.
Many.
But
Yeah, it was this debate about you weren't singling out any one thing from the movie. So the thing where I originally called it content free, and then we decided that wasn't true, and then
right,
second one, non-particularizing or something like that.
so are we happy with carried along by?
Well, my
Yeah.
question there is what's the difference between that and when we've said absorbed by for previous things? Are you seeing a distinction?
To me, it seems the same.
The distinction for me is that in my recollection is that you have been absorbed by at a deeper level than this movie. When you were like when you were listening to your grandfather's tapes or whatever, you seemed more engrossed
Mm.
there. Whereas here, you're watching a movie, you're carried along by the plot of the movie. There's nothing else going on, and there's nothing else particular. But it's not like you're on the edge of your seat,
Mm.
carried along by, which it seemed like you were more in absorbed by.
Mm. Interesting.
So that's the distinction that I would make. I don't know. And the other thing is that in my sampling experience, there's a lot of samples where people are watching a movie and they're just carried along by the movie. Like just their samples read exactly like this. I'm
Mm.
watching the movie. I'm doing whatever it is. I'm taking in probably whatever the director wanted me to take in. I don't really know what the director wanted me to take in, but the plot's going on. I'm carried along with the plot. I'm listening to what the characters are saying. I'm understanding all that stuff, but nothing in particular.
Mm.
That's very common when people are watching a movie,
Mm.
and I call that
Interesting.
carried along by a movie. But I don't generally say carried along by the conversation, although maybe I should and maybe I do actually.
Hmm. Yeah, to
Because
me, I get what you mean about the grandfather being like deeper absorbed. But I don't know about some other things we've called absorbed, or conversations, or movies, or whatever. Like it seems like splitting hairs at a certain point, whether it's absorbed or carried along.
yeah, yeah, because I understand the distinction you're making, Russ, and sort of agree with it. But agree, Julian. I'd like to look at all the ones that we've called absorbed and then see, like, hang on,
Mm.
are there enough differences between them that we would be able to call some carried along by and some call absorbed when they're more engrossed? Engrossed is a great word, Russ. That's really relevant here. Because I think, yep, I see a slight difference there, but is it enough of a difference or is it splitting hairs? I'm hearing what you're both saying.
So my guess is that there is probably a continuum out there. Whether it's worth to try to make it is another story.
Mm.
It's for sure not. I'm paying attention to some particular aspect. It's not that. I'm not paying attention to the dress that the girl is wearing or the
Mm-hmm.
sound that the voice is making or whatever. It's none of that. And it's not having my own visual image of something. And it's not having sensory awareness of. It's, it's none of that.
Mm.
Whether there is a distinction to be made between carried along by and absorbed, probably there is. Whether it's worth making it, I don't know.
But then also back to what you were saying about whether you do describe conversation as carried along by. Because I'm now more swayed to that of like, I think, if I recall correctly, that there are certain examples of me where we've said absorbed in conversation that now with this sort of perspective might actually feel more carried along by
Mm.
conversation.
I think I agree with that exactly, totally.
Because
Mhm.
yeah, I think the absorbed bit suggests like a more engrossed sort of thing. And I think that there's been examples of just purely, yeah, I'm in the conversation, I'm here, I'm, all of that. But whether it's that step back, just carried along by. Interesting.
My impression of some of the conversations is that you're more engrossed than you were in this particular part of the movie, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm happy to leave it as question marks.
Yep.
And see whether we can figure it out. When the green meeting doesn't necessarily have to solve problems as we go.
Yep.
It's collecting data that we can come back to later.
Have you ever done, sorry, this is a slight sidebar, but have you ever done any, this is well beyond my knowledge, but like MRIs or brain scans of any people that you've worked with?
I have done one fMRI study. And it was a very small study. It was it was an interesting study.
Did you learn more?
Sorry?
Did you learn more with the aiding of, the scans? Like, did it help you understand anything further or differently?
I guess the answer to that is no.
Why?
And the reason for that is that scans at their current level of sophistication, which may be their as best that they ever get, are always the result of averages across many samples. And that you can't really find out about the details of things when you have to average across many samples, I think. So the kind of thing that I found, which I thought was interesting, was I found enough to be able to say that inner speaking on demand lights up a different part of the brain than inner speaking when it naturally occurs. So we had in the sample, I think, had 5 or 6 people in it, 5 or 6 participants in it, and 1 or 2 of them, I forget now the details of it, but 1 or 2 of them had sort of naturally occurring inner speaking. And so we were putting these people into the scanner and letting them sit there in the scanner for a while, and then taking them out and interviewing them and putting them back in the scanner, so like 10 times into the scanner and back. So the big investment of scanner time and whatever. But there were, and during some of those things in the scanner, we were telling them, we want you to engage in inner speech. So when the light comes on, say elephant, or when the light comes on, say pencil, or whatever. The advantage of that is that you can time lock those samples easily enough. That's why people give cues when they're in the sample, when they're in the scanner. But the particular person that I have in mind also had sort of a lot of times where the random beeps occurred during inner speaking, real natural inner speaking, and what we found was that the brain, the portions of the brain that lit up on average while inner speaking naturally occurring, were different from the portions of the brain that lit up when you told somebody, say pencil or say elephant or whatever.
That's fascinating.
And I think that's a totally important finding, but it doesn't say much about inner experience. It says more about bad studies of inner experience. Most fMRI studies are on-demand studies, and what this study does is it calls that into question.
Wow, that's fascinating.
On to day 7.
Yes, sorry, I sidebarred. Gosh, a lot of chat there.
You can't complain that we didn't take it seriously.
No, not at all.
Words present.
I'm buying it.
Yep.
And then there's something about diffuse inner experience,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah, what's that mean?
Sorry?
What does that mean?
The way I understand it is the words are clearly present. What questions do I have? Or like the kind of semantics of them or the meaning is like diffuse and not clear. Like it's not like you have any clear questions or your mind is clearly set on any one thing. That's how I understand it.
So this is the portion of the description that we're writing in.
Mm-hmm.
And to my reaction to it now, which it seems to me was the same as it was then, but it probably isn't, but is that we were not able to sort out the natural attitude description from the experience. So there was something about the phrase. So it's possible that what Julian just said was right, which is sort of natural attitude from my point of view. And but it's also possible that from Mel's point of view doesn't really know what she's talking about here. How it could be that a phrase could be clear, but I'm not speaking it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what to say about it. So I'm going to say it's veiled or foggy or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to disentangle that. We are working backwards, so we're getting to Mel as less and less experienced as a DES participant.
Mm-hmm.
Autopilot?
Autopilot.
And words without semantic meaning?
I guess that almost seems like too much, even.
Sorry?
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems like a shade above nothing.
I
So
agree.
words without no semantic meaning seems like the words are present, but they're... Maybe.
Like I that feels more just like a fact of reality other than part of my experience to me. Like we know words are coming out of my thumbs and that's happening, but I don't think that the words are part of my experience.
Like that?
Yeah.
Or maybe no awareness at all?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
called it autopilot, which we usually said for something that was somehow slightly experienced. We also put that between brackets. So it's kind of hard to tell, but
So maybe what we really should say is nothing.
Yeah. And then
maybe.
yeah, I'm okay with that.
Like that.
Or we even discussed this exact thing, that I understood it as a nothing, and then you said you said your original, she is not experiencing anything, seems categorically too severe. She is not a statue or dead or conscious or asleep.
Thank you.
So like a shade above nothing. But, yeah.
So I softened the description. Thank you. She is not a statue.
So this is maybe an aside, but the reason that I want to make sure we write no semantic meaning in our green description is that There are a lot of people, probably most people, most psychologists, who think that when words are present, there is a semantic meaning that is present.
Mhm.
And that's experiential. And I just don't think that's true. And so this is an example of when Mel is meaningfully operating with words. She's typing not gibberish, but words that mean something to her at some level and to whoever it is that she's going to get. This is skillful word usage, but without any direct experience of it.
Yeah, okay.
Could be good to keep track of for that. Though.
Sorry?
Could be good to keep track of for those purposes.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then the hearing the brother and the mom, but it's less the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Chance that we confused context with experience, but seems like it was present.
We buying that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the target that we were talking about earlier. Would carried along by the conversation be just as good as absorbed in the conversation?
I mean, based what's written there, that sounds like a fair thing to say, doesn't it? This feels like carried along by.
Receiving what my sister was saying. Sounds like carried along by.
I think it's a carried along.
We buying that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sensory awareness, bodily.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The same sensory awareness of pain, and then also the moisturizer. Although if it's more about the action of applying it,
Right.
that's sensory awareness or doing. I don't know.
Yeah, doing is a technical term for me, so I can't use doing here.
Yeah.
But, the action. Aware of the action?
Mhm.
That sounds reasonable for this.
It's funny, this is day 7 and it already feels like I'm not as good here as later. Like, how many days did we do? 14 or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it feels like here is where I'm really starting to feel like not casting doubt, but like just that I'm not as good at describing stuff here already in 7. And that's
So
7.
I had that reaction too a couple of samples ago, and this sample's here, and I filed away to myself to say that let's see whether that's really true, whether this is something about these particular day 7 samples, but.
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder about the seeing in the mirror, because if you did experience that, if that was an experience, then that would make this multiple experience, I guess, because it's like 3 different things, which isn't so common for you, I think.
Yeah,
That kind
I
of makes
feel
me
like
wonder if you're really like, taking and seeing yourself.
correct. I sort of have suspicions that the mirror and the moisturizer part are more facts of life here rather than things that were truly part of my experience.
Yeah. Like
Like
the,
I think the bodily pain thing is accurate, and then the others I cast a lot of doubt on.
by the mirror, I really wonder. Moisturizer, I mean, it's definitely plausible. I mean, DES isn't about what's plausible, but what's actual.
Yeah,
It's
it just
really
feels like
plausible that you can be doing 2 things. But
it sort of feels like it would have actually been an autopilot-y sort of thing. But I've grabbed the detail of, oh, well, I was doing that, so I must have been experiencing that.
maybe.
But it's just interesting to note, like, this is still day 7. Like, that's a lot of sampling done. But we're feeling like it's not as sharp. That's a lot of hours already done, but it's not there. So it takes a long time, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Hard. Also, I was mucking mucking some of it up.
I think it's true. It takes a long time.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see, times where Julian, it's like, oh yeah, we're all like, oh, our questioning wasn't as good there. Like, so it's on both sides where we're like, oh, we weren't as good back then.
Yeah.
Kind of satisfying.
The iterative method applies both to the interviewer and to the participant.
Mm.
The participant has to learn how to answer questions, and the interviewers have to learn how to ask them. And we're all always fighting the natural attitude or whatever.
Mm.
On to day 6.
Yep.
Mhm. Carried along, taking in. See, we even used taking in.
Yeah, carried along by conversation. Yeah, so at this point, all your chat is still really about whether the levels of nothingness carried along by whatever it is are even like possible. Like that's the chats we're having here, right?
Yeah, it was before my thinking
Accepted
changed. It seemed to me like I was wondering if sometimes you could be so absorbed, it just becomes kind of nothingness. You're just in it, but it circles around to being similar. Because the way you described it was so different to me. Like I hadn't experienced that.
The difficulty of it is really what I've been wrestling with, how to convey that in some informative way, in some instructive way. It goes beyond us. So if I could write a book, I've been trying to figure out how to write a book or make a movie, or I think the best that I've been able to do about that is the videos that I've been making, and this process here that we're in is the best I've been able to do to try to somehow convey how difficult it is, because Julian and I had substantial battles about this stuff for a long time, and it's hard to imagine how frequently that could take place. And I don't, it has to. You have to have somebody who is highly skilled, as I give myself credit for being, but at the same time patient enough to deal with the, with people who think they know more than you do and probably don't. But that's the human condition in some very important way. And what do you do about that? How does that is the heart, I think, of whether DES can ever really be worth doing. Is it possible to convey that somehow? And what do you do about it?
If it's a method that can live beyond you and your particular way of doing it, and be transmitted, or if it just
right, and which is part of the deal. I think it is possible that DES cannot possibly live beyond me. That is, there's something fundamentally Hurlburtian about the method. I don't think that's true, but I don't know that I'm capable of untangling that. And I don't know what to do about that. That seems like sort of the fundamental thing to try to figure out, and I've been working at trying to figure it out for a long time. And but I don't know what to say about it, other than the wrestling match is interesting.
Well, yeah, and so do you feel like the best that you have come up with thus far is exactly these different videos and journeys that you're putting up on the website now that show very transparently different experiences and whatever, and people working it out along the way and that sort of stuff?
That is absolutely the best that I've been able to do so far.
Yeah.
Whether it's good enough or not, that's another question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, but that's the best that you've come up with.
That is the best that I've been able to do. But I would say that at every step of doing it, there's got to be something better than this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But
I've been putting, the commentary that we've been having, and the argument, or if you want to call them that, discussions, debates, whatever, that Julian and I mostly have been having through this, I think are fundamentally important to the process.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I've obviously been putting my energy into it. And Julian's been putting his energy into it. And Mel has been putting her energy. So that's the best. It's the best that I've been able to do. And the irony of it is, I don't know whether it has any value at all, really. It may very well have personal value to me, or to Julian, or to Mel, and maybe not beyond that. In which case, well, maybe that was good enough.
You don't believe that, though, actually. You do believe that it has value beyond yourself.
If you're asking a St. Peter question, like if I were at the door and St. Peter says, this is, you got to answer this question one way or the other, and that you give the correct answer is the key to the up or down here. I think that it has value other than beyond me or beyond us. But I would be eager to find out what St. Peter thinks about that. I mean, I would give that was the best answer that I can give you, but I don't have any reason to believe that I would end up with the harps rather than with the coals.
Yes. That was a very Russ response to that. You have such respect for the truth.
Yeah.
It's an interesting process.
Your words carry weight and you respect the weight they carry.
Onward.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about your patience. If you, if you're a patient person, if you've been that way, or does it come out of doing DES? Because a lot of the questions, you're gonna ask the chair thing if they're experiencing the chair. Like, I don't know if I would have the patience to deal with my shenanigans during the Mel interviewing. So. Is it a learned thing?
So I don't think I can answer the question whether it's a learned thing because I've been doing it for so long. So it is part of me for as long as I can remember. Let's put it that way. I do think it comes. I don't see myself as patient. I see myself as trying to get it right. Whatever it is, it's time, and that's a characterological deal, I guess. Probably for me for a long time. I'm interested in trying to get it right, and that requires patience. It seems to me, but it's not because I'm a patient person. It's because I'm interested in trying to do it the right way. And if you try to do it the right way, you end up having to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more the result than the.
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing is so complicated that I'm not just saying, I don't know whether I'm on the right track or not. If St. Peter were to have asked, do you think that you've been on the right track for the whole time? I would have had to say, I don't know the answer to that question.
Maybe a bit more optimistic than you, but
Yes, I think so too. I think we all are, but we've had this discussion with Russ before and I think this is part of you, or not being able to untangle yourself from the work at points and things like that. That you do this thing, Russ, where you not diminish yourself, but you. It's like it's a very Australian trait, actually. You sort of over humble yourself. You go, oh, well, I'm not quite sure. Whereas everyone else is more sure than you that it's really meaningful. It's a really interesting trait that you have about your work.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But also, I think maybe that's, maybe actually when I have bodies of work in terms of documentaries I've made and stuff, I'm perhaps in that, where maybe when it's just your own work, you're a bit more yeah, I'm pretty sure it's good, or I'm pretty sure it's important, but yeah, I'm just trying my best, whereas everyone else can watch it more objectively or whatever. And, maybe we often just are not our harshest critic, but there's something there.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence. I don't think there's any hard evidence that the method will outlive the method as I see it will outlive me. I don't think there's any evidence about that.
Well,
and I don't, and what I guess I think is, I haven't gotten to the place where I've seen a bunch of people or enough people who I've thought were really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite likely my personal failing. But I don't. But but that's just the way it is.
Or just that it's really, really, excuse my language, but fucking hard.
Right.
So I think that's the challenge, and again, why we're all here of how is the best way, what's the best way to get everyone to have these discussions that we're having about all of these? Is there a better way? Is DES the best way? What's the best way to educate people about DES? If so, it's that bit of what is the best way to just get people to them reflecting on the stuff that this leads us to reflect on?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Correct.
Well, I finally started editing a video about DES today, so
Cool.
you can see if that leads to anything. I
Amazing.
started with Carrie, we haven't finished this analysis, and Carrie's a bit easier, I think, to introduce people to.
Yeah,
And yeah.
I agree.
But anyways, onwards.
Onwards.
This is autopilot.
Mm-hmm. I'm fine with the vibe as a code.
Yeah, like what do you do there?
It's like a feeling that's for like less strong. Like you don't want to call it a feeling. Is that just a light feeling, or is it worth talking about vibes or states or whatever?
Some of the language that has come out to describe some of my stuff, jeez.
Mm-hmm.
So from my point of view, this sample is a dilemma between, is Mel actually experiencing a lightly positive, happy state?
Mm-hmm.
Or is she in a lightly positive, happy state and experiencing nothing?
Mm. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we were competent to make that distinction on day 4.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're competent to make that distinction now because we only had one. You only got one chance, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a really challenging thing to try and... Oh, hello. A challenging thing to work out in general, because, like, the distinction is... like, I understand the distinction, but I'm not sure if you could ever really work that out anyway. Like, that's hard.
So I agree with that. What I think can be worked out is how definitive you want to be about it.
Yeah.
I think we can get to a position where we could say, I was happy, but I wasn't particularly aimed at being happy, but I wasn't also aimed at not being happy. There's something positively happy, vibey, whatever, maybe, whether that's an experience or maybe not, I don't know.
Mm.
I think that is as good a description as you can get, which is a lot different from saying Mel was in a positive, happy vibe state.
Mm.
Because I think that, well, it's a natural attitude thing. I think it's too definitive without being clear enough in distinguishing between what's experienced and what is a fact of the universe.
Yeah.
Onward?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be more of it.
Mm-hmm. Another nothing one. Nothing autopilot. No.
Because in these early beeps, it's 4, it's still not that early, but yeah, we're just trying to establish, wait, is this something is the nothingness a real phenomenon that I experience? And then we've worked out how to perhaps all articulate and understand it better. But it's like here we're just even trying to work out if it's like, wait a second, what's happening?
Well, that's why in my head nothing always involves or nearly nothing. I just don't think that's possible And the philosophers use the example of money, and they can say, well, if you've got a penny, then you can't say you got no money. And I can say, yeah, you're right about that. You can't say you got no money, but in the real world, it doesn't matter. If all you got's a penny, you're in trouble. The real world distinction between nothing and only a penny is not.
Copy paste. But this was interesting that here you were talking, and you still described it as being the same. This was the first time that came up, I think.
Yeah.
And it surprised me.
And I agree, it is interesting.
It is interesting, and it comes. It's the interesting. It is, in its own way, it brings a focus on the natural attitude, I guess I would say, because the natural attitude says, if I'm talking, I've got to know what I'm talking about, and that is not experientially true. I can be talking and saying intelligibly what it is that I mean to say, and that those words can be rolling out, and I don't have to know. I can greet them in the same way as I would greet the words that somebody else was speaking to me, even though they're coming out of my own mouth.
Which is fascinating. It does sound sort of impossible.
It only sounds impossible in the natural attitude.
Yeah.
When you recognize that the Mel is however many billions of neurons, I don't know the number, with however many trillions, I don't know that number either, of synapses. There's not one word processor in there. There's a very complex word processor, and she can be spitting out words in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's sort of crazy. Like it's mind blowing. So I understand, Julian, why you're like, wait, what?
It's crazy from the natural attitude.
Yeah.
See, we had to talk about it.
We had to talk about something.
Uh-huh.
All right.
So that was day 4. We might make it to the end here.
Wait, did we skip day 5?
Did we?
Did we do this tote bag sample? I don't remember doing that.
No, we've skipped day 5.
No, we didn't do it, so we probably skipped day 5.
Okay.
Just so many facts that don't need to be there.
Sorry?
It's just interesting seeing the descriptions or the way that I was doing DES back in here, because there's so many facts of life that I am just these don't matter. All of them, that context. Okay, who cares? What it is here is just that I was carried along by a photo of my tote bag.
You like the tote bag?
Oh, my dog is having a freak out.
So the question would be, is admiring and carried along by the same thing?
Didn't we say
that's true.
Didn't we say taking in for the picture before, since it was static?
Shh, stop.
Hey, doggo. Coco.
So many dogs. Oh, yeah, Coco, you've heard about this dog.
Yeah, famous. It's cute.
So I think we've agreed that carried along by and taking in are more or less the same thing when applied to an unfolding situation or a static situation. And the question is whether this admiring is something that is more than just taking in.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a...
Yeah, I would want to see the description a little bit more again to know how accurate admiring is. Like if there is enough to warrant it being something more than just carried along by.
Like, is it in the realms of feelings? Like, thinking that's nice, but that seems much too strong. Is it in the realm of sensory awareness? Like, but that seems too detailed. So.
But, and also I'm conscious of whether admiring is just the vocabulary I've used to,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm looking at the picture, but I've used the word admiring, but is there like admiring as part of the experience, or am I, you know, have I just used a word as opposed to I'm looking at the picture of the tote bag?
That's what makes life totally interesting.
Mm.
Words don't have, almost no words probably have absolute meanings. And admiring is one of those words that's ambiguous.
Yeah,
my guess is that we weren't capable at this time to distinguish between those things. So.
I agree. I agree. I think that's the best we can do here.
Ready.
Yeah, again, I'd say the same thing.
So what are we going to say about this? Nothing?
Yeah, I think this is nothing autopilot again, isn't
So we tried to make a distinction here.
Well, Russ, is it premature to talk about this? But sometimes, I think I've seen when you do the coding with the spreadsheet, you have like numbers for nothingness, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you put stuff somewhere along the continuum. Is that, or is it too early to talk about that process?
So I think we could do that. I can't remember ever doing it, actually. I might very well have done it, but I don't actually remember doing it. If I thought, what I would say is, if I thought it was possibly productive to see whether we could distinguish between shades of nothingness, then I would have no objection to having us rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever. Personally, I don't think it's productive, and I think that exercise would be more frustration than it's worth. But but it's a democratic operation in a way. And
No, I tend to agree. I think it'd be more frustration than it's worth.
Yeah.
I just think it's not possible that we could rate 1 to 5, but there is absolutely no reason to believe that Mel's 4 is going to be the same as my 4 is going to be the same as Julian's 4.
Yeah.
And I, dressing it up with numbers, it's still a big. So this is slightly more than nothing.
Autopilot.
Didn't really mean to shout here. So that's day 3. So it does. This is relevant to the previous conversation we had. This was a very complicated set of interactions that we had going on here, and in the sense that this is the first time that Julian and I sampled together. I think, is that right, Julian?
Yeah.
Mel was the guinea pig of that. So there was a lot of shit going on here, trying to figure out who was doing who what people meant, the how to mean it and how to say it and how not to say it and whatever. There was a lot of stuff going on.
100%. Yeah, you got a particularly challenging case to kick you off, Julian. My shades of nothingness.
Yeah. So did Russ. Am I the only person you've done DES with who hasn't learned it from you directly? I mean, I read your books and stuff.
We had one graduate student. I don't remember whether we actually ever wrote this up, but we had a graduate student who came into the lab, and we gave her some instructions, some things to read, and then had her do what she thought was DES interviews on the way in. So before she had any personal interactions with us. I don't remember actually whether we ever made of that. But no, you were more invested in it than anybody else, I guess, for sure. More invested in the study of inner experience. Mel doesn't know all of that story probably, but Julian had sent me stuff that he had done, and I'd been critical of it, and thought he would go away, but he didn't.
And we're still here.
Withstand the criticism.
So there was a fair amount of history before, and then did you sample, Julian? Did you become a subject?
Oh no. I'm potentially curious, but I don't know. I feel like maybe you could learn more by looking at other people instead of inward. Yeah.
What are sorry, this is a sidebar, but your students, Russ, what are the courses that they take that are DES related?
There aren't any.
Well, but how do they learn this?
From the kind of things that we're doing right here. Julian is what we're doing with Julian is what we would do with my students. When I have a lab, then there would be more group interviews and more conversation back and forth. This is what I thought. This is what I thought. But it's all trial and error.
But as in that they get the opportunity to do that as part of their psychology bachelor studies at University of Nevada. Like what's the?
So it's a very complicated thing, and so they're in a PhD program. I think probably all of my students are in a PhD program in clinical psychology, and they get standard training in clinical psychology, but not from me. And then their dissertation work or their master's thesis work or their research work is with me. And I am very critical of the work of what they're learning in the clinical psychology world.
Yeah. And
so that is something of a difficult thing for them. And you know, I'm the lone ranger in the department, so I don't have I used to have another faculty member, but he went on to become the provost of the university, and so he doesn't do this kind of work with me anymore. But we used to have a joint operation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, interesting.
But I have not taught courses on descriptive experience sampling. I teach statistics. And, there's some irony there, but
correct.
I don't know whether I've told you that story, but when I started this work back in the day in 50 years ago, Anybody who was interested in something like consciousness was well out in the fringe of psychology, and thought to be a soft-minded person. And I, having been trained as an engineer, the university here, the department here, wanted me to teach graduate level statistics, which I said, okay, I'll do that. And I hated it because none of my students knew anything coming in that I thought was valuable. And it wasn't just that they were coming from UNLV; they were coming from around the country, and they had not mastered sophomore level statistics, and I was supposed to be trying to teach them graduate level statistics, and that was a dilemma, which I thought was my fault, but I eventually decided it wasn't, and so I said to the department basically, let me not teach this anymore. Let me teach undergraduate statistics for a while and see whether there's possible to teach something in a way that people can remember it a year later. Yeah. And out of that, I developed what I thought was a better way of teaching, learning statistics, and I eventually wrote a book about it, which is now a textbook in its 6th edition. And so when I went to sell the book to the publisher in the first place, I told the editor, my primary interest, I think this is a good way to teach it, but my primary interest is because I want to be thought of as not soft-minded by the psychology world. So if I'm a published statistics textbook author, then they can't say, well, he's afraid of statistics or whatever. And she said, I never had somebody try to sell me a book by telling them it wasn't their primary interest.
True.
But she signed it. But at any rate, I teach statistics and use that as a way of paying the bills, basically, or being a productive member of the department.
So fascinating.
But it's crazy that, I don't know, they don't give you a seminar on DES and consciousness.
I could. I could.
Yeah.
But I never have. And sometimes I criticize myself for that. I don't want to teach a course on consciousness science because I've never considered myself a consciousness scientist. I still don't consider myself a consciousness scientist.
Why?
The world of consciousness science, I think, is far too theoretical. Consciousness scientists think they can do without DES, and I don't think that's possible. I don't see how it is possible to be a consciousness scientist without at least trying to describe what people's consciousness directly experienced stuff is. But consciousness doesn't think that's important.
Not even just not DES, just no method.
Right.
Like most of them just are like, well, I always think in words.
Exactly. So to teach a course in consciousness science, I would have to teach a lot of stuff that I think is just flat bullshit.
Right.
And that's hard for me, and so it's easier for me to teach statistics. But arguably, I should have taken that on more aggressively across my career, taught more, forced myself to teach why I thought consciousness science was on the wrong track or whatever. But I didn't.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating that there's no way to be able to teach what we've been doing as some sort of seminar exactly.
I shouldn't say I never did it. I actually did it once or a couple times actually, and I had students sample and then talk amongst themselves, and well, not amongst ourselves, but it was basically this kind of stuff with a few more people around them and at the undergraduate level.
At undergraduate level, interesting.
Yeah.
And was it worthwhile?
I didn't do it again, so I guess I didn't think it was. A total value.
They taught some DES where I went to university. Well, I did an exchange semester in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and they taught DES, but they they were all kind of practitioners of this other method, microphenomenology, which there was kind of a big debate, between the two camps. But it wasn't actually DES the way they taught it. But we did sample each other and do the beeps and talk about that.
What the best way to have proceeded? I don't know the answer to that. I have done what I have done.
But you landed in a Booker Prize winning novel.
Not everybody can say that. That's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't think that novel actually won the Booker Prize. I think that.
Oh, really?
I think one of her previous novels won the Booker Prize.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think this one.
Close enough.
People were probably scared off by that opening part. You read the reviews; they say I like the whole book except the.
She lost me in the first 4 pages. Something about nothingness or something. Wait, what was that other word that you said before, Julian? Microphenomenology?
Microphenomenology.
What's that?
It's another method by looking at consciousness, but it's not as rigorous. There are no beeps, and you can ask about someone's experience of like 10 years ago. Like it could be like, oh, when you solved that math problem 10 years ago, what was going on in your mind? And then people make up stuff.
How on earth could I remember that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, in their defense, they got some method behind it. But what I would say is when Julian asks questions, which would say, well, if I knew about the movie, would I know more about your experience? That's the issue that drives microphenomenology. So their goal is to try to figure out what there is that goes beyond Mel's direct experience that might contribute to her direct experience. Mm-hmm. And they think they can make it do it. And the answer to your question about how they can do it, Mel, is they have them relive it. So the event happened 10 years ago, but now we want you to bring that back into mind, and experience it again, and then we'll bring it back to mind and experience it again, and bring it back in mind and experience it again. I have argued that there's no experiencing again involved, and but that doesn't mean that there isn't something important that they could learn in that regard. I have never said I don't think that there is nothing of value in microphenomenology, but I don't think they do what they say they do. It might be valuable. Mm. But it is that kind of thing is a dilemma to me. Would it be better for me to criticize people, which I have done with microphenomenology, or would it be better for me just to go straight ahead and try to do DES as best I can do it?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have chosen the latter, but I don't know that was the best way to do it.
I suppose I can bring this up now. I wanted to ask you, Russ, at the end, but maybe interesting to you too, Mel. But I'm doing some more DS sampling these days with a friend I studied with in Slovenia or in my studies, and she did microphone, but she's been interested in both methods. She's very open-minded, and she reached out to me and wanted to do DS sampling. She might use it in her research. But yeah, it was pretty impromptu, but we worked out the beeper thing with her phone, and we did one day, and we're planning to do it again. But yeah, I'm wondering, is it a good idea for me to do it solo, or do you always do it with a co-investigator, Russ, and then, yeah, maybe even if you or one of your students or Mel or someone is interested in it, co-investigate?
So I think co-investigation is usually a good idea. I don't always do co-investigation. I would say 90% of the time I probably do, but most of the time I'm doing it with a student, and part of the value is training of the student. Mm-hmm. But also part of the value is keeping me honest. So it's we can have conversations where I say this is what I think, and the best outcome of that is for somebody else to say, no, I don't think that's right, and then we can have a conversation like we have had here.
Like I would say, it is very difficult with her because she's done a lot of microfen stuff, and it very, like what you were saying about microfen, looks for the very slight or on the edge or things, we call it pre-reflective things. So everything that in DES we might say, well, we don't really know if that's there or not, so, let's leave that for now. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's very, very difficult for me.
That would be a challenging situation.
Interesting.
Also, she's resistant to using the in-ear beeper, and I've said some reasons why it's important, why you think it's important, but she thinks it's distracting her from, too distracting. So in our next session, I said, well, maybe let's do half with it in the ear and half without, and then we can see and compare. So that's how I'm going about it. But yeah, how would you approach that if someone just really doesn't want to do the thing in the ear and says, why can't I just set an alarm and have it play through my phone?
Well, how I would handle this is different, but what I would notice is that almost everybody thinks they don't have to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
They want people think that they can get away with something else and it doesn't really matter. And how the fuck would they know? But even when I talk about DES to people around the world or whatever, most people say, well, this would be a faster way to do it, a more streamlined way to do it. And hardly anybody says, well, how could we do it even better than that? And that, I don't understand that. Maybe if DES were a totally established method and we decided this was as good as it can be done, then it would be time to come along and say, well, we can dismantle this and say, well, we can take away this piece of it and we can take away that piece of it and we can still end up with something good. But you can't. That isn't the mindset. The mindset is, I just want to do something easier first, and that'll be good enough. I just don't think it's true. So shall we press on here and get the?
Let's go on, yeah. Seems a bit different than autopilot. There's some kind of like beginnings of a thought process. It was more than we were able to articulate in some other examples. But then again, it's a very early day, so it's hard to tell.
So that's the dilemma.
Yeah.
And I would say, in this, you might find this valuable, Julian, that if the choice is between saying that we know what's going on here and saying that we don't know what's going on here, almost always it's better to say I don't know what's going on here. I think that might be generally true, because if we say there's nothing, we don't really know what's going on here, and then we sample again, we can have the possibility of discovering what's there. But if we say at the outset, I know what's going on here, and this is what it is, I think that pollutes the upcoming discussion. And so in my recollection of this sample is that I would be saying I don't know what Mel's trying to say here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like some sort of nothingness, and that's about all we've got.
Right. And I would say, living in the don't know, people don't do that very well. People in general have a hard time with it.
Mhm.